The ace of space, 15 minutes past 9 now.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Live from the New Scientist Labs, Janine Young, newscientist.com.
Yes, Janine Young is in Melbourne City and she's with us once more. Good morning to you, Janine.
Good morning to you.
And today, first up, discussing Venus and Mars, men and women, the differences. What are the differences? In fact, are the differences kind of just made up by society, or are men and women really that different?
Look, men and women are different, and we do have different structures in our brains, and we do generally, very broadly, think differently, and we do approach problems in different ways. However, the differences in our brains and the way that our genes structure the way we're likely to behave are probably not as marked as we're led to believe. The people who really study this get kind of annoyed when people come out with oversimplistic demonstrations and descriptions of how men and women are different by saying that all men are going to be better at spatial recognition and all women have higher verbal skills is overstating it. Yes, there are differences in our brains, but it's as much the way we are brought up. The old nature versus nurture argument. It's our environment in conjunction with our genes and things like hormones that fundamentally make the difference as to how we turn out and the way our brains, and indeed we express what's going on inside our brains, how it all works. And so to be able to come up with a simplistic, yes, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, is wrong, because it's just not that simple.
Have they been able to find, though, like a kind of a different wiring of the brains? they wired differently at all?
They are, yeah, and that's one of those things, that there are clear differences. For example, in the way men and women are predisposed to things like mental illness. We know that boys, for example, are 6 to 10 times more likely to be diagnosed with Asperger's disease, 4 times as likely to end up with language disorders like dyslexia, and twice as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Women are more predisposed to depression, and men to alcohol dependence and to much more antisocial personality type disorder. So, yes, there are differences in the brain, but that doesn't mean that it's all down to the way we're wired. It's also the way that we're brought up. It's a combination of genes, hormones, and the environment. When you look at the traits towards things, so for example, if you take the difference between the way boys and girls work together when it comes to height, when you compare them, it comes out to a factor with a test that I don't quite know how it works, but the number is 2, right? So if we take height, which has really only so much to do with sex, boys tend to be taller than girls. Okay, they tend to be, but there's enough really tall girls out there and enough really short men that prove that this isn't the absolute. It's not going to be 100% of the time. So yes, genes do play a part there. But if you start looking at things like a preference for girls' toys, then the number is only 1.8. Yes, there is a preference for girls to play with girls' toys.
Yeah.
But that said, a friend of mine's 18-month-old was playing with Barbies last week. It doesn't mean anything necessarily. If you start looking at verbal fluency, it's 0.5. Computational skills, mathematical concepts, there is no difference between boys and girls. Assertiveness, 0.2 to 0.8. They're actually quite low in the way that they work. So, yes, there are differences, but it doesn't mean that it's the be-all and end-all. And it's actually all about the way we're influenced as we grow up. You can have things called epigenetic changes. So it's chemical changes to the DNA that doesn't change it structurally, but it does change the way that it's expressed. So it means that the early exposure that you get in your life can actually change the way those genes function. So it's not as simple as just saying that, yes, men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
From men and women and the differences to Gaddafi and the difference between us and him. Well, not quite, but there has been some work and some studies into whether or not scientists can predict the instability of a particular region and whether or not a dictatorship is actually ready to fall.
Well, the Department of Defense in the United States has been trying, And by Robert Gates' own admission, they've not gotten it right once.
Not successful.
3 or 4 weeks ago, you would have thought that things were fairly stable in the Middle East. You had dictators that were busy doing their funky thing and repressing any kind of rebellious thoughts, and suddenly everything just went bang. But the thing is that mathematicians are looking at this going, well, actually, these are just complex systems, because you have a number of input factors, if you want to think about it mathematically, because these are systems. You had a trigger point, and all of a sudden, particularly in Tunisia, things went bang, for want of a better word. The trigger point was the suicide of a young Tunisian man and a spike in food prices. But there'd been a lot of festering annoyances, difficulties, frustrations before then. So you can actually think about this like a complex system. And so mathematicians are saying, well, it's similar to an ecosystem in many respects, because, for example, you can see fuel loads building up in, say, bushfire-prone areas, and you know that all it takes is a trigger if you have enough fuel lying on the ground, and it's going to burn, and it's going to burn fairly badly. So they're saying that what you can do is actually start looking at the symptoms of these different societies and situations, and start putting the factors into complex equations, effectively. They were looking at this from a mathematical point of view.
Yeah.
And they can say, well, okay, we do have some ingredients for instability here. They won't know what the trigger point is, but they can tell when the ingredients that are causing the issues are building up. Now, I think the least helpful thing that they've said is that if you can work out when that instability is coming, then societies should be able to reorganise themselves and do their own little revolutions before you wind up in all-out war.
Sure.
I don't see any dictator that's going to sit there and go, oh, my society's getting a little bit upset, I think I might leave now. It's not going to happen.
No.
But it means that you can actually get some idea of the politics and how things might play out if you can try and work out when these instability factors are coming together and, just how bad they really are. In short, no, they can't predict it, but they think they might be able to get an idea.
Yeah. Interesting research there. Well, you can find those in the pages of New Scientist magazine, which will come out next week. And, of course, newscientist.com as well. Janine Young, we will talk to you next week as well.
See you, Wammo.